It's shocking to discover that your workplace, which you believed was constructed on the bedrock of truth-telling, is, in fact, more like a flimsy web of lies. It's so flimsy that those who call out the falsehoods and manipulations must be driven out. Telling the truth is the one forbidden act, and those who break this rule must be scapegoated. It's a highly effective deflection. Everyone looks at the scapegoats as they walk away, rather than turning their questioning gaze on the institution. In the gaslit brain, we will turn our questioning gaze directly on the institution. We will ask questions such as, who is abusing and manipulating, and what is happening in their brains? Why are liars believed and truth tellers doubted? What's wrong with our brains? What happens to brains when they are manipulated by gaslighting? Why do good leaders cover up abuse, fraud, safety issues, and more? Why do good leaders drive out whistleblowers, regardless of their high level of expertise and talent, to protect perpetrators who put the institution at risk? So that it no longer jolts us when we issue falsehoods. Those who have lies told about them at work, lies so serious that they have cost them their job, knocked them off a hard-earned career path, hurt their place in the community, stripped them of physical and mental health, are the casualties of institutions that normalize deceit. The gaslit brain brings together contemporary stories of top employees who are exposed to the lies of bullying and gaslighting. A key defining feature of gaslighting's lies is that they are self-serving. We look at the stories of how lies impacted employees through the lens of brain science. If we don't understand how our brains create reality and the way it differs from illusion, we certainly will not understand when and how our brains fall for falsehoods. The book is designed to prevent crises in the workplace that revolve around the lies of bullying, gaslighting, and institutional complicity. The overarching goal is for leaders and managers and HR to become experts in how to prevent the contagion of lies from infecting their institution to keep their workplaces healthy, productive, and profitable. Throughout the gaslit brain, I refer to workplaces as the institution, regardless of whether it's a corporation or company, not-for-profit, or something else. I use institution to examine institutional complicity with abuse. Likewise, I refer to abuses with the umbrella term bullying, regardless of whether it's psychological, social emotional, sexual harassment, cyberbullying, or any other of the many ways in which a person is targeted for maltreatment at work. The lies of bullying, in all its different forms, are contrasted with the truth-telling of those who speak up. In Chapter 8, we will hear from a lawyer whose career is being dedicated to representing whistleblowers on why telling the truth is so important and yet so fraught with risk. Institutions that protect and enable those who bully are likely to scapegoat whistleblowers. It is this normalized, counterintuitive workplace phenomenon we will examine from a host of neuroscientific angles in the gaslit brain. When the penalty for speaking up impacts your livelihood, career, family, and health, it couldn't be more serious. It's a bizarre sensation to be treated as if you have committed a grave crime, referred to in research as committing the truth. But it is exactly what happens to whistleblowers in all kinds of workplaces. Although the majority fall for, or choose to believe, the institution's gaslighting, which positions the truth teller as the villain, those who see through the illusion to the abusive, fraudulent, dangerous institutional reality and refuse to remain silent about it can teach us all a lesson about how to recognize and resist gaslighting. As we examine in depth, gaslighting hinges on reversals. Its essential goal is to make the truth teller appear a liar. The victims appear as perpetrators, the sane employees as crazy employees. Whistleblowers, striving to save the institution and its integrity, are reversed into saboteurs who apparently are trying to ruin the institution's reputation. The motivation and evidence for wanting to sabotage the institution is not forthcoming. Or worse, it is fabricated, which should cast doubt on the institution, but rarely does. Gaslighting has an agenda. It is a series of elaborate falsehoods, behind closed doors behaviors, smear campaigns shared in private. Gaslighting works hard to divide and conquer, not only populaces, but even individuals. It seeks to divide its victims externally and internally to fulfill its own needs and drives. Those who gaslight ensure that victims are kept isolated, believing that they're the only one, always wondering if it's their own fault. Gaslighting is self-serving. The one thing it cannot tolerate is those who pose questions within the institution or from the outside through investigative journalism and media scrutiny. Those who gaslight keep insiders quiet with non-disclosure agreements, NDAs. When asked to comment in the media, they reply, no comment. When the media seek an official statement from the institution, officials can never give it because they've done their own internal investigation. They are protecting targets. They are maintaining confidentiality. Note the reversals. The fact that the investigation is internal poses instant problems with conflict of interest and suggests cover-up. The institution is destroying targets, but claims it's protecting them. It is breaching confidentiality for its own agenda, but claims it cannot speak publicly. The Gaslit Brain unpacks individual and institutional self-serving lies. It looks at ways to identify lies, protect your brain from their harmful impact, and maintain your safety and sanity. The book examines the way certain individuals and institutions strive to make you believe something that is not true for personal gain, whether psychological, financial, or reputational. They bully you because of their own psychological dysregulation. They try to manipulate you for money or embezzle your funds, posing as someone they're not, and lying each step of the way. When you speak up, report, call them out, the institution turns on you to protect itself, covers up for leadership's failure to prevent the crisis, and even sacrifices its best and most talented to maintain the institution's reputation. The irony is that their reputation is built on covering up wrongdoing. It doesn't have to be this way. Brain science can teach us a healthier, more productive, and more profitable way forward. In the Western tradition, the first recorded liar, hell-bent on destroying others and gaslighting to do it, is Satan. It's the 21st century, and surprisingly, the lies that fuel gaslighting haven't changed much, if at all. This is good news for all of us who want to be informed about gaslighting before it happens to us or to others in the workplace. In Genesis, appearing to Eve as a snake, Satan, the personification of evil, gets information from her first that he can use to his advantage. Extracting information is textbook gaslighting. Satan learns that Adam and Eve are forbidden by God to eat or even touch the fruit of tree in the garden. The risk is death. Satan takes this information and twists it, casting doubt, undermining God, making it appear that it is God who is in the wrong and not to be trusted. Although Satan seeks destructive power, he accuses God of his own crime. Such a reversal is classic gaslighting. The perpetrator of harm claims to be the victim of harm. It makes your head, or more specifically your brain, spin. But that's the whole point. The lies at the heart of bullying are designed to unbalance you, destabilize you, make you think you deserve it or someone else deserves it because something is wrong with them. What's concerning is how much our institutions get trapped in the same faulty logic. Somehow the one who reports abusive conduct is the one in the wrong, who must be expelled from the workplace and its community, while the perpetrator needs protection. It's mind-bending and has gone on for a very, very long time, but with brain science, hopefully that's about to change. Understanding how brains work, how they can detect lies, how they can be trained to identify gaslighting is the key to preventing the manipulation that occurs when we believe lies. Back to the Bible. The snake says to Eve, "Ye shall not surely die, for God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil." Note that Satan flat out tells Eve that her interpretation of reality and her essential relationship to her maker are both incorrect and untrustworthy. Textbook destabilizing and confusing techniques used by those who are gaslit in biblical times, and they are still going on today. Abusive individuals still use the technique of isolating the targets from those who care about them, such as family and friends. They cast doubt and aspersions on this caring community to constantly increase attention to their bond with the targets and the target's dependence on them. Satan's method has not changed in its modern form. He offers his alternative reality constructed on conjured up half-truths that led Eve and Adam to losing their bond to God, being driven out of the garden, and setting off on a path of immense suffering where they do no good and evil, but rather than being gods, they lose their connection to the divine. The King James Bible credits Satan in his serpentine form as being more subtle than any beast of the field. Gaslighting is frequently a subtle art that holds up a mirror to targets, reflecting their own needs and wants. Eve wants to have her eyes opened. She wants to be godlike. She wants Adam with her every step of the way. She seeks knowledge. Eve has no notion that these desires will be turned inside out by Satan, who seeks to have her ruined. Subtle is elusive, difficult to understand or analyze. It appeals to the shadowy parts of the self, parts that lie within the dark chamber of the subconscious. All of us carry these vulnerabilities, and we can all be manipulated and blind to the betrayal taking place. How can you protect yourself against a betrayal that you can't even see? Where Satan differs from present-day bullies and gaslighters is that he cannot manipulate God. In contrast, abusive individuals are adept at playing on the vulnerabilities and desires of targets, as well as those in leadership positions. They groom the targets while they groom the leaders, the managers, and HR, and others in the community. Think of all the times you've read stories about reports of bullying, disregard for safety, fraud, being shared with leadership, management, and HR, yet nothing effective was done. It fell on deaf ears. How is it possible that bullying and corruption go on for years in established, respected institutions? As we examine in later chapters, it requires lies, gaslighting, and the fall of leaders, managers, and HR who go from being principled to being complicit. Some leaders are so gaslit, they don't even know what happened. Notably in Christian iconography, the serpent who appears to gaslight Eve in the Garden of Eden was sculpted to appear as half snake, half woman. This artistic portrayal of the personification of evil associates Satan with Eve, engendering a misogynistic narrative whereby the woman brings original sin into the world. But from a psychological and neuroscientific angle, Satan reflecting Eve's wishes and desires by mirroring them is textbook gaslighting and is still being used effectively today. The psychopath not only puts on a fictional face to mirror what the victims want, but also love bombs them, creating intimacy that lays the groundwork for manipulation and destruction. The perpetrator's allies, who fell for his gaslighting and followed his nefarious directives, might suffer serious penalties, while the perpetrator walks away with impunity. Merriam-Webster's dictionary announced that 2022 saw a 1,740% increase in searches for gaslighting, with high interest throughout the year. We are living in an age of overwhelming disinformation, and apparently people want to know why. What or who is the source? What is the motivation? Individuals want to learn more about gaslighting and how it uses lies to manipulate them. Merriam-Webster refines the term for today. The idea of a deliberate conspiracy to mislead has made gaslighting useful in describing lies that are part of a larger plan. Unlike lying, which tends to be between individuals, and fraud, which tends to involve organizations, gaslighting applies in both personal and political contexts. The key line is lies that are part of a larger plan. Lies that are part of a larger plan is the domain of the dark triad, who spread disinformation throughout the institution as it succumbs to their psychopathic fiction, as we discuss in greater detail in part 2. Whether it's the macrocosm of political propaganda or the microcosm of institutional complicity, as we study lying and gaslighting, we see that asking questions about the agenda, the larger plan, can help in recognizing falsehoods and manipulation. Writer, historian, and activist Rebecca Solnit lasers in on the agenda. What's striking about gaslighting is that it's an attempt to push a lie or a distortion by using advantages of power, including credibility and social status, to overwhelm the gaslit person or populace. It's another kind of violence, not against bodies, but against facts and truth. What we need to know in the workplace is that those who attain positions of power, credibility, and social standing may also be part of the dark triad. Narcissistic managers in particular tend to rise to management positions in organizations in disproportionately large numbers. Being particularly self-absorbed, they are known to use and abuse their subordinates and play up to their superiors to assure their own personal career success. We tend to think that a person who has earned a position of credibility and social standing is de facto trustworthy. However, as noted, the opposite is more likely to be true. As we will examine in part 2, narcissists, Machiavellians, psychopaths, in other words, the dark triad, rise up through the use and abuse of subordinates. They gaslight and groom them just as they gaslight and groom their superiors. They are more likely to lie than to tell the truth. Throughout the gaslit brain, we make a case, especially when drawing on the brain science, for the repeat error we make in mixing up position and person. We constantly fall for the power, credibility, and social standing of an individual's position that leads us to excuse or not even see destructive behavior done by the person. When we know powerful and prestigious positions may well be filled by narcissists and others in the dark triad, we need to become far more alert and aware about how they may operate in destructive ways. Psychologists Dr. Robert Hare and Dr. Paul Babiak refer to the psychopaths at work as snakes in suits. They describe the impact of gaslighting, which perfectly outlines what happens to Eve. Victims will eventually come to doubt their own knowledge of the truth and change their own views to believe what the psychopath tells them rather than what they know to be true. Imagine how you are likely to doubt yourself when in a courtroom with a judge who labels you with the ancient mythic crime of Eve. As reported by Amrit Dhillon in August 2023, the Supreme Court in India created a handbook for judges, urging them to shun words like seductress, vamp, spinster, and harlot when talking about women. Note, perpetrators are not using these misogynistic and derogatory terms. Judges are. In Indian courts, sexual harassment is trivialized as Eve teasing. This phrase positions Eve as weak, easily manipulated, carrying the taint of original sin, and along with it, Adam's downfall. Since biblical times, Eve apparently teases men to their demise. She is embodied in all women for thousands of years, and women are apparently still at it, teasing men who sexually assault them. A man commits rape. It's the perpetrator. But when you factor in Eve teasing, it's easy to use gaslighting to reposition him as the victim. At present in India, judges can give rapists the option to marry their victim, as if she is the perpetrator, to restore the woman's reputation. In this legal construct, she did the teasing and got raped. Now the rapist can marry her to erase her teasing. According to this skewed way of thinking, the fault originally lies with her. In this reverse narrative, the rapist can heroically step in and remove her crime by offering his hand in marriage. It's hard to understand why the man is even in court if it's his decision whether to destroy or enhance the woman's reputation after he's raped her. In the Supreme Court of India's new handbook, the Chief Justice of India exposes the gaslighting at work. He writes that marriage is not a remedy to the violence of rape. A remedy to the violence of rape, as noted above, is to do a brain scan and diagnose the empathy erosion in the rapist and assess whether he poses a danger of violating others. Instead, in India, the courts plan to cure rape with marriage. Let's unpack the manipulative reversal at work. A perpetrator commits a crime against a target. The court does not penalize the perpetrator. Instead, the perpetrator is offered an opportunity to cure or remedy the sickness of the violation. What speaks volumes to me about this legal transaction is the deafening silence of the victim. Not only is she not offered an opportunity to choose a cure for what has been done to her, she does not even have a space in which to speak about the violence done or how she wants to proceed. In a culture that describes sexual harassment as Eve teasing, one wonders what victims would say if they had voices. How many do you think would choose to marry their rapist? How many would feel thankful and relieved that their rapist had agreed to restore their reputation after raping them? How many of these 21st century victims would argue that the rapist is injurious teasing? If ancient texts are relevant to contemporary crimes, then Indian women need to balance the Eve teasing with an equivalent male predecessor. We are in a court of law, after all, and legal precedent is the way to understand and assign accountability. In another ancient text, Ovid's Metamorphoses, Tereus poses as a caring family member by law. He presents his good side and covers up his abusive side. He is married to Procne, who is the sister of Philomel. He has offered to accompany the sister Philomel on a boat journey to see Procne at their home. On the journey, he drops the sheep's clothing and rapes his sister-in-law. Fully in abusive mode, he cuts off Philomela's tongue to ensure her silence about his crime of rape. Notice that his conduct provides a closer parallel to contemporary rapists than Eve ever does to female victims of a violent sexual assault. Both with the ancient rapist from Roman mythology in Ovid's Metamorphoses and the contemporary rapist in today's courtroom, not only is there a violation of the female body, but this extreme harm is then followed by silencing the victim, legally in court and literally in the myth. The mythic silencing is today's NDA, when used to cover up, for instance, the many rapes by a Harvey Weinstein. We will discuss this in more detail in Chapter 4. Why is Tereus teasing not institutionalized and precedent-setting like Eve teasing? Why is it not used by the Indian legal institution to address rape? Let's review one more time to cut through the normalizing. Eve teasing in this new handbook for judges is textbook gaslighting. The symbolic woman Eve is positioned as the actual perpetrator and the rapist is her victim. Note the reversal. The manipulation of justice by language used to eliminate female civil rights and bestow them upon men who are offered the chance to save their woman victim through marriage is a glaring sign of injustice. The judges now have a handbook that does not prohibit such language or rulings. It merely urges them to refrain from this archaic treatment of women because it may lead to a, quote, distortion of the objective and impartial application of the law, end quote. It appears that even in 21st century courtrooms, where words determine innocence, guilt, and sentencing, the jury is still out on whether terms or word choice matters. Language is critically important when you're exposed to the lies of bullying and gaslighting. You cannot recognize the manipulation without extreme clarity around word choice, as we will focus on in Part 3. In 2023, Diane O'Leary reported that the term #medical gaslighting had taken social media by storm, but this application of the term differs from how we'll use it. Thousands of posts by patients, mostly women, report that doctors have ignored, minimized, or dismissed their symptoms, misdiagnosing them as anxiety or stress with serious consequences. Although this is awful, it is not precisely gaslighting in the way that we are using the term. Doctors do not benefit from putting patients at risk. If anything, they open themselves up to accusations of malpractice, loss of reputation, possible lawsuits. Although they may well be sexist or careless, they have no overarching agenda to misdiagnose female patients. Doctors receive lopsided education and training that has seen most research done into male health, and they make errors when diagnosing women's illnesses. Their misdiagnoses are unfortunate at best and dangerous at worst, but they aren't self-serving lies. It's a complex question because gaslighting in the courtrooms of India also doesn't directly benefit judges, but it forms part of an overarching misogynistic approach to justice. We could say that this same flawed approach influences medicine in ways that put women's lives at risk. The key point here is to understand that in our use of the term in the gaslit brain, gaslighting is carefully orchestrated, consciously done, and it serves the one using it. The book examines gaslighting among individuals and at the institutional level. The goal is to provide readers wanting to understand how gaslighting works and why we're vulnerable to it with an in-depth treatment of its seductive, malicious manipulation. Only when we understand intellectually, emotionally, and ethically how gaslighting works and why it's used in bullying can we begin to put in place neuroscience-informed protections to save our health, our sanity, our careers, and our lives. The term gaslighting entered the popular consciousness through a 1944 film, the American psychological thriller Gaslight, in which a husband wants to make his newlywed wife lose her mind, to have her locked up in an asylum. His agenda is to steal jewels that he knows are hidden in her late aunt's house where they are living. The movie's name is symbolic of the many manipulations the husband undertakes to gaslight his wife into believing she's insane. The film is set in London in the late 19th century when lamps were fueled by gas. The wife notices that their lamps randomly go dim. One way the husband destabilizes her is by denying that the gas lights are indeed dimming. It really is such a small manipulation. It's so minor that you might not make much of it. The husband has been showering his new wife with adoration, referred to in abusive relationships as love bombing, making it unlikely for her to think he's being deceptive. When the wife is told that the gaslights are not dimming, she chooses to believe her devoted husband and doubt her own perceptions. This is the beginning of what could be the end. The wife not only notices that the gaslights are dimming, but also that sounds are coming from the attic. Her husband denies the sounds. She can't find her brooch, even though she knows it was in her purse. He has removed it without her knowing. She finds a letter from one Sergius Bauer, and her once adoring husband becomes furious with her. Later, he explains that he became upset because she was upset, which she wasn't. The husband tells his wife that the gaslights are not dimming, there are no sounds coming from the attic, she lost her brooch as it was not in her purse, she didn't see a letter from Sergius Bauer. On top of all that, he tells her that she stole a painting. And he has found out that her mother was put in an asylum. These are the textbook reversals and manipulations of gaslighting. He convinces his wife that not only is she fabricating things that don't exist, but also that she's a kleptomaniac, too high-strung, and unwell to be out in public. She must be crazy like her mother. Stealing the aunt's jewels is symbolic of a much more deadly crime, stealing his target's sanity. The husband is building a case for how his wife is obviously unstable and untrustworthy. Slowly but surely, the wife begins to lose her grip on what's real and what's false. She loses faith in her own perceptions. These are the textbook symbols of the gaslit brain. In a hilarious recent reference to the film, political and sport commentator David Squires did a cartoon series on Luis Rubiales, president of the Royal Spanish Football Federation, who became an overnight social pariah by grabbing forward Jenny Hermosa at the FIFA World Cup awards ceremony and forcibly planting a kiss on her mouth. Rubiales, with a well-established reputation for doing what he likes with women, in a sports and country seething with issues around entrenched sexism and sex abuse, tried to gaslight the whole world by saying the kiss was consensual. It was a valiant attempt, and he probably has used this technique effectively many times. He gave a rousing speech to his powerful football leadership community about how he would absolutely not be resigning, and the room full of men erupted in applause. You can well imagine that the tried and true technique of calling Jenny Hermosa a liar, who consented, then tried to blame him for the kiss, would work its gaslighting magic. But this time, it didn't. Sometimes gaslighting doesn't work. David Squires, in his cartoon, encases Rubiales' head in a 19th century gas lantern, as he comically tries to convince the world to fault Jenny, his victim, not him. Rubiales is lying while telling the world that Jenny Hermosa is a liar. It's textbook. Luckily for the 1944 wife in the movie Gaslight, it being a Hollywood movie and all, a policeman takes an interest in the unfolding manipulation. It turns out that the wife is merely useful to the husband and he exploits her for his own means. Remember, those who gaslight have an agenda. Their targets are merely pawns. A trademark of those who gaslight is to have no empathy for the target. In the movie, it turns out that the husband is the one who's untrustworthy. It's him who steals, not his destabilized wife. Another trademark of those who gaslight is that they accuse their victim of possessing their own negative traits. They lie and accuse their targets of lying. They have dysregulated brains, as we will examine in detail later, and accuse their targets of being dysregulated, and so on. In the movie, it is then discovered that the husband had murdered his wife's aunt. Although he killed her, he failed to locate her jewels. Those who gaslight others are not fazed by those who suffer or even die in the wake of their destructive impulses. They do not feel guilt or experience regret. Another textbook aspect of gaslighting, the husband covers up his true identity with a fake one. He says he's the pianist Gregory Anton when in fact he's the murderer Sergius Bauer. This is the classic textbook split personality, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which we will discuss in greater detail in Chapter 6. In institutions, gaslighters use their position to cover up the harm they do, just like Dr. Jekyll exudes the qualities of a respectable, caring physician, which is an effective cover for his violent impulses. The abuser must appear as good to cover up his plan to do evil. Gaslighting in a marriage is disturbing. Gaslighting in an institution, such as a corporation, a church, school, sports club, courthouse, retirement home, government agency, news station, or political party, is deeply disturbing. The target in the marriage may lose her mind and come to believe she is, in fact, corrupt and insane. Her relationship to reality becomes unhinged. As has been demonstrated throughout history, the target in institutional gaslighting leads to whole segments of society losing their minds and coming to believe whatever alternative facts and fabricated events they are being fed by those in positions with power, credibility, and social status. This collective madness can occur in cults and even in nations. We are well informed by history how incredibly dangerous and destructive this manipulation can be. In 2022, the term gaslighting was published in a United Kingdom High Court judgment for the first time in what is being called a milestone hearing in domestic abuse cases. Describing the case, Maya Oppenheim defines the act as follows, quote, gaslighting refers to manipulating someone by making them question their very grasp on reality, by forcing them to doubt their memories and pushing a false narrative of events, end quote. Although this has been legally identified as manipulation in a marriage, it applies equally well to the workplace. Those who tell the lies of bullying and gaslighting at work make targets question their grasp on reality, force them to doubt their memories, and push a false narrative of events. This false narrative is often believed by higher-ups who've been carefully groomed over time to believe in the power, credibility, and social standing of the one bullying. In this legal ruling, gaslighting is viewed as part of a campaign of psychological abuse that uses coercion and control to destabilize someone. Those who study workplace bullying frequently deplore the coercion and control leadership model entrenched in corporate culture. What's textbook in this case is that the husband, who was a mental health worker, used the power, credibility, and social standing of his profession to tell his wife and others that she was bipolar. Ironically, the gaslighting brain is the one that more closely resembles a dual personality disorder that shifts in mood from being the caring husband one moment to being the manipulative villain the next. Gaslighting works on reversals as we examine throughout our analysis of it. And this is a textbook reversal. The husband uses his position to appear to be a caring professional when he's harming his wife as an abusive husband. As reported by Oppenheim, the wife's lawyer, Charlotte Proudman, a leading human rights barrister in England, said that the judge's use of the term gaslighting gives it legitimacy and credibility. In her experience, she notes that abusers have long been warping victims' realities, yet there's been no legal term to shed a light on the problem. One of the most effective tools to identify and dismantle the siren song of gaslighting, whether in a marriage or a workplace, is language, as we discuss in detail further along. Gaslighting depends on language and cognition to manipulate others. Therefore, one of the most effective antidotes is attention to language and cognition. Controlling the narrative, silencing questions and concerns, forcing the community to adhere to the institution's fabricated facts, all prop up the harms of institutional complicity. Lawyer and workplace bullying expert Paul Peltier finds that the lies of workplace bullying flourish when the leadership operates from a coercion and control model, as identified in the Manipulative and Dysfunctional Marriage Under Scrutiny in the UK High Court. Coercion and control as a leadership model sets the stage for the drama of bullying, gaslighting, and institutional complicity to unfold. Psychiatrist Dr. Helen Reese discusses leaders who use fear and intimidation to exert their authority. As we see throughout the Gaslit Brain, she uses the concept of infection or contagion to describe its impact. Quote, "This type of failed leadership tends to spread across organizations like the plague." As we will see, bullying and gaslighting, both techniques to exert coercion and control, are entwined and sicken workplaces in tandem. A year later, in 2023, a lawsuit was launched in New Jersey. Once again, gaslighting is one of the alleged behaviors that drove Joseph Nye, former president of prestigious Seton Hall University, from his institution. As reported by Ted Sherman, Nye alleges violations of the law against the former chairman of the board at Seton Hall, including the sexual harassment of Nye's wife. As a whistleblower, Nye alleges he was targeted with gaslighting, retaliation, and intimidation, which led him to resign. Attacks on those who speak up are textbook. Institutional complicity in silencing those who speak up uses textbook methods, and gaslighting is long overdue to be understood as one of the weapons in their arsenal. Dr. Dorothy Susskind, an expert in workplace bullying, refers to the specific abuse meted out to those with high ethical standards, taking us back to this integrity piece that the dark triad cannot tolerate. So let's say Dr. Dorothy Susskind, an expert in workplace bullying, refers to the specific abuse meted out to those with high ethical standards as a degradation ceremony. Although gaslighting is being recognized in the law, it is not fully understood from a psychological and brain science perspective, and it is rarely applied to workplace culture. In 2023, psychologists Priyam Kukreja and Jatin Pandey developed a gaslighting at work questionnaire. They call it the GWQ, Gaslighting Workplace Questionnaire, that revealed two key components in workplace gaslighting: trivialization and affliction. According to psychologist Mark Travers, trivialization may take the form of making promises that don't match their actions, twisting or misrepresenting things you've said, and making degrading comments about you and pretending you have nothing to be offended about. Victims start down the path of wondering if they're being too sensitive. Affliction may take the form of excessive control, making you self-critical, creating dependence, or being very sweet to you, then flipping a switch, becoming hostile shortly after. Again, this kind of maltreatment causes self-doubt. Kukreja and Pandey conclude the GWQ scale offers new opportunities to understand and measure gaslighting behaviors of a supervisor toward their subordinates in the work context. It adds to the existing literature on harmful leader behaviors, workplace abuse, and mistreatment by highlighting the importance of identifying and measuring gaslighting at work. Introducing a questionnaire on gaslighting is an effective way to draw attention to how this form of manipulation occurs. Equally important, it provides vocabulary for workplaces to understand and discuss this specific form of abuse. In recent years, Forbes began publishing articles on gaslighting in the workplace, indicating that it is on the leadership radar. Jonathan Westover advises on, title of his article is, How to Avoid and Counteract Gaslighting as a Leader. And his approach is insightful, but only if you're dealing with healthy brains. In terms of avoiding becoming a leader who gaslights, you could apply his approach. And these are his points. Practice regular self-reflection and foster intellectual humility. Actively listen to the perceptions of your team members. Practice vulnerability and own up to your mistakes. Develop and sustain authentic relationships of mutual accountability and trust. The problem is, As we will examine in detail in the following chapters, those who tell the lies of bullying and gaslighting do not experience self-reflection. They do not feel humility as an emotion, just like they don't feel guilt and remorse. They are disinterested in others' perceptions, as their brain tends to objectify targets. They oftentimes experience a roller coaster of shame and grandiosity, and they deny vulnerability or the possibility that they have made a mistake. In short, they cannot have authentic relationships. They follow an abusive script that turns them, if not stopped, into a caricature who repeats bullying, lies, and gaslighting manipulations over and over. They avoid accountability and see trust as a game they want to win. Using psychological research to understand how the brains of manipulators work hopefully will give us a better chance to prevent their negative impacts in the workplace. Manzar Bashir describes 6 textbook gaslighting behaviors. Quote, trivializing your feelings, shifting blame, projecting their behavior, insulting and belittling, creating confusion and contradictions. But he articulates one in particular, withholding information, that is very tricky to identify and yet can have devastating impacts. Gaslighters often use a tactic of withholding information and keeping you in the dark about crucial matters. By selectively sharing or concealing facts, they manipulate your perception of reality and limit your ability to make informed decisions. It's insightful. He shows that gaslighting, along with a great deal of psychological manipulation, is harmful in its omission and passivity. In other words, it's the opposite of how we measure the harms of physical abuse. When you hurt somebody's body, we assess severity by how much active damage was done. But when the brain has been manipulated, we need to find ways to figure out how much lack of action causes damage. Physical assaults are designed to weaken and harm the body. Assaults via gaslighting are designed to weaken and destabilize the brain and the mind. Injuries to the body are far more likely to get immediate treatment, whereas neurological damage to brain architecture, disruption of the mind's ability to function healthily, are too often ignored. Psychologists and brain scientists have developed extensive evidence about the way in which gaslighting brains operate, notably different from brains that do not manipulate. It's time we learn this key information to protect ourselves from gaslighting in institutional contexts. Knowledge of psychopathic brains and the way they work can better protect us from the gaslighters' domineering manipulation and their cruel capacity to exploit us for their own purposes. The book is organized into 3 parts. Part 1 of the Gaslit Brain draws on the stories of recent targets of bullying and gaslighting in the workplace. I unpack my personal experience with the lies of bullying, gaslighting, and institutional complicity within the context of other victims who, like me, refuse to conform to a corrupt workplace and now speak up publicly about how destructive and risky it is to allow a false narrative to dominate the truth. We hear from Megan Carl, a top executive at Nike, Jonathan Wilson, a detective superintendent in Scotland Yard, and Julie McFarlane, a law professor at the University of Windsor. Stories are one of the best ways to educate, as the brain remembers them effectively. As neuroeconomist Daniel Kahneman explains, when learners are surprised with a statistical fact, they do not learn. But if you surprise them by an individual case, they can learn the key lesson or how to take the generalization from the individual scenario. My individual case, put alongside the cases of Carl, Wilson, and McFarlane, is surprising, and hopefully all encourage leaders, managers, and HR to take useful generalizations from our individual scenarios. In part 2, we learn the psychology behind why we are blind to betrayal and who seeks to betray us. For educated, experienced, intelligent leaders in their field, such as Carl, Wilson, and McFarlane, it seems unbelievable that they, of all people, could have fallen for the manipulations of bullying and gaslighting. Why do we put on blinders to betrayal at work? What is going on? Equally surprising is to learn about those who betray and abuse. How and why do they lie so effectively that we fall for it? The science that explains the neuropsychology of abuse perpetrators is key information to help us stay safe and sane. It's a good way to take off workplace blinders and keep them off permanently. Those who deal in the lies of bullying and gaslighting are so skilled at manipulation that they can even lead psychiatric experts to doubt themselves and to subscribe to the manipulator's version of events. There's no shame in being tricked by them, but there are ways to protect yourself, your team, and your institution. There are ways to have leaders, managers, and HR educated and empowered to identify perpetrators early and effectively manage the mayhem and risk they bring to the institution. Psychological research provides ample evidence of the many mistakes our brains can make when we are assessing and deciding what's real and what's false. Considering how high stakes the decisions are when it comes to bullying, abuse, corruption, gaslighting, institutional complicity, we will be far better positioned to stay safe and sane when we learn how to manage our brains, avoid typical errors, and capitalize on our mental strengths. Part 3 of the Gaslit Brain offers leaders, managers, and HR a way to apply brain science insights to recognize and resist the lies of bullying, gaslighting, and institutional complicity. We look at 6 proven ways, well established in research, to learn how our brains construct reality and why they're susceptible to manipulation. Recognizing the self-serving lies of bullying and gaslighting begins with understanding how our brains differentiate reality from illusions. Knowing how your brain decides to believe one person and not another clearly will be helpful as you navigate the workplace and mitigate risks in your institution. Creating a culture and shared vocabulary around knowing how and why our brains fall prey to manipulation allows leaders, managers, and HR to prevent lies from infecting the institution. The first proven way strengthens exteroception, which is how our brains make sense of incoming data from the environment. We discover why it's incredibly important to keep these fundamental pathways in the brain fit and strong. Neuroscientists have designed brain fitness for us, and for a healthy workplace, it is key. The stronger and healthier the brain's ability to decode data, the stronger and healthier are its higher level cognitive functions. You'd never go into a boxing ring without physically training to put up a good fight. Likewise, leaders, managers, and HR who want to battle efficiently against bullying and gaslighting in their institution need mental training. The second proven way examines interoception, which is how we interpret information coming from our internal bodily systems. Applying this knowledge to the way we construct emotions from this information is a vital way to discern the manipulations of those doing harm. Those who tell the self-serving lies of bullying and gaslighting use our emotions against us as part of their repertoire for doing harm. Leaders, managers, and HR can ensure that their workplace is well educated on how we construct emotions, how we articulate them, and how much a nuanced and doubled up vocabulary can help protect us from perpetrators' attempts to confuse us. Gaslighting is all about making us replace our own relationship to reality with their lies. We learn how to resist this manipulation. The third proven way unpacks why our threat detection system, or neuroception, fails us all too often when it comes to the self-serving lies of bullying and gaslighting. We build on previous insights into the dual presentation of abusers that leads us to drop our guard right when we should be on high alert. Becoming more skilled at reading the environment, informed about how our nervous system fuels our feelings of safety, supports an understanding of how vital connection and community are to the way we handle stress that inevitably comes when we are being manipulated. The goal for safe, healthy workplaces is to prioritize the balance that comes with homeostasis. The fourth proven way trains us to resist our brain's tendency to habituate to almost every workplace environment, regardless of how safe or how sane. Instead of normalizing our environment and the behaviors of our colleagues, we learn strategies to become far more perceptive. We learn to double up our vision so we don't only fall for what's right in front of us, but also consider what lies in the background that may prove to be risky. The fifth proven way teaches about how our brain tends to take intuitive shortcuts that make us highly susceptible to manipulators. We need to apply the discipline of thinking slow to stay sane and safe. We call this technique proprioception as a way to stress the importance of balance in our brains and bodies when it comes to establishing a healthy, accurate understanding of what is reality. The final and sixth proven way looks at how our brains are double in their construction. The left and right hemisphere have different ways of constructing reality, and knowing how they work together and separately is key. The left has an opportunist approach, whereas the right is more altruistic. Once again, we see the critical importance of balance as we're moving toward workplaces that tend to be dominated by the left hemisphere, with its narrow focus and essential self-interest. We need to create workplaces that never ignore the right hemisphere and its bigger picture that cares about connection, relationship, and community. Most of us who are targeted bullying at work are caught off guard. Because we are not trained to anticipate manipulation, we're easily victimized. I wish I knew then what I know now. The more aware we are of how abusive brains operate and how our brains are completely thrown off our game by them, the better able we are to prevent workplace bullying and gaslighting. The more leaders, managers, and HR are informed, the less likely they'll be drawn into institutional complicity. Those who tell the self-serving lies of bullying and gaslighting with ease are part of a formidable trio referred to in psychology as the dark triad: narcissists, Machiavellians, and psychopaths. Throughout the Gaslit Brain, we'll refer to them as the dark triad. If you're interested in their differing brains, see the bully brain. How can we identify these manipulative people more quickly and refuse to believe them? What if there were a way to protect ourselves, and more specifically our sanity, from lies? What if there were proven strategies we could use to keep our minds safe from shattering? These are the questions that drove the researching and writing of the Gaslit Brain. I needed to answer them because I was being gaslit at work.